hat.
Putting my president hat back on. Good morning and good afternoon once again. So this special membership meeting is called to order at 10:34 a.m. Pacific time. The purpose of our meeting is to propose a change to our bylaws related to qualifications for being on the ANTN Board of Directors. Bill, could you put the proposal up on the screen so everyone can see it?
Yep, it will be up in just a second.
Okay, thank you so much. So historically, the board positions have only been open to ministers. And then a few years ago, we expanded that to include practitioners and licensed Unity teachers. And it's the board's contention that, and I know that everyone agrees with me, that if you have been in this teaching for more than 2 years, most likely, even though there might not be a certificate on your wall, you are at least a practitioner. We value your wisdom, your membership, your input, your experience in the world. And so our intention is to expand the opportunity for members who are not ministers or practitioners or LUTs, but have been in this teaching for a while and have completed at least 2 years of spiritual studies to be allowed to run for the board and to serve on the board. So as you see there, the proposed changes, we're adding, so as you see, licensed or credentialed practitioners, licensed Unity teachers, or licensed or credentialed ordained ministers. Adding one position on the board may be open for a lay member who has completed at least 2 years of New Thought spiritual studies. And of course, as we do when you join ANTN, if you tell us you're a minister, practitioner, or LUT, we ask for that documentation. And so in this case as well, if someone is interested in running for the board as part of the nominating and vetting process, we will ask for that documentation, obviously. So again, adding the possibility or the invitation for non-ministers, non-practitioners, non-LUTs who have completed at least 2 years of study in New Thought. We're also proposing that we change the number of years of the criteria for running for the board was being an ANTN member for 2 years.
It
For
was
1 year.
one year.
Sorry, it was for 1 year. Now we are proposing that be changed to 2 years, and that criteria would be for everyone who wishes to run. So for ministers, practitioners, LUTs, and lay people must be members of ANTN for at least 2 years.
Michael, you had your hand up. Was that?
Yeah, I switched over to a virtual hand. So, question: how do you define 2 years of spiritual study? I understand you're going to ask them to submit documentation, but if that's a pretty broad brush that may not have much meaning to it unless it's defined. I don't know how it's defined.
And that's certainly a good question.
In many cases, we asked the student who their teacher was. And in most cases, that's going to be it's somebody who's a minister or a member or otherwise involved. If it's somebody who says that I've been studying and reading Thomas Troward on my own, then we're going to dive into that a little bit and make sure that the person who's been doing this is authentic. The interesting thing about the nominating committee is that they're pretty sharp at determining who's got the high consciousness that we're looking for on the board. So I think of this as a framework, Obviously, if it's credentialed Emerson classes, it's really easy to say, I've been doing this for 2 years. Same thing with Unity, CSL, the other organizations where they're studying with a teacher. If it's somebody who needs to be go outside the lines, then that's the sort of thing that is up to the nominating committee. Does this constitute 2 years of study?
Well, the outside the lines is where we might have issues. I'm going to talk a little bit now about just governance, okay? That if someone comes along and says, well, wait a minute, I studied with John Smith or whoever they happen to study with, who happens to have his license in some unheard of teaching, and I studied with him for 2 years, and I can get you proof of that. Now we reject him because we said, well, no one's heard of this teaching, no one's heard of this guy, his credentials, anything. From a governance point of view, if it's in our bylaws, now we have a little bit of an issue if we reject them to be put up as a nominee to join the board. See where I'm going with that? I'm not saying that maybe we have to tie down that has to be Unity or religious science or CSL or whatever it is, or Emerson. I'm not saying we have to do that necessarily, but it's sort of broad brushing now. I know, we could run into this issue anyways, but particularly here, I think we're leaving ourselves a little open for an issue. I'm just thinking out loud on that. I'm not trying to limit us, although maybe I am, but just thinking through that perspective.
Well, keeping in mind, and you might have been on the board a few years ago when this question came up, that there was someone interested in joining who had a background in what they referred to as New Thought, but was not actually New Thought. So
I remember.
We're right. So we're and it might be hence your question.
Yeah.
So we're definitely aware of that, and so would need to be one of the recognized New Thought disciplines for them to qualify.
Well, I'd suggest then, since it's going to be in bylaws, I really think we need to frame that out a bit more. Just my suggestion for the board to think about, that maybe we need to define what that is. Since these are official bylaws of the organization, we're, a non-official nonprofit. And so, my thought would be, maybe if that's what you're thinking, Jerry, maybe that's what the board needs to frame out a bit more. I know it, of course, puts you between a rock and a hard place of then, are we being over restrictive? But if that's kind of what you're thinking about, then maybe we need to put it in that light, just to get the board, prevent the board from getting themselves in a situation that's unsavory, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
If I may jump in here,
Thank you, Michael.
being part of the discussions that got us to this point, Michael, also, and thank you, it's a great perspective. I don't see a concern with it in that just saying I don't think we're painting with too broad of a brush, because there is still a nominating committee, and the nominating committee still needs to make recommendations, and then the community still needs to vote on it. Personally, I like sorry, I'm forgetting, bylaws to be a little more broad, to allow for interpretation as the organization progresses and evolves. And I don't believe anybody that would be outside, too far outside, would make it through the other qualifying process. I remember when I ran the questionnaire that the nominating committee required, I believe, would filter out any nefarious actors, would filter out any group that's maybe trying to infiltrate this organization. As it is, we're really talking about only one member of the board at any given time would be a lay member, and that would actually be a relatively small percentage of the collective voice that is on the board. So I think there are stopgaps both in our governance structure, and I think there are protections in our nominating process to even get to the point of even being considered to be on a ballot for a position. I hear your concern, and I would still vote for this, believing that it is solid and that those protections are in the policies, which can more easily be changed. Once we put this in bylaws, it's, as you're seeing here, we have to hold special meetings, call all this, everybody together. It takes a little bit more time to fine tune how we operate. That happens in the policies and procedures. So that would be my perspective, and I will cede the floor to anybody else.
Okay. Robert, thank you. Dr. Janine, good to see you.
So nice to see you.
You muted.
You just muted yourself.
I apologize. I thought
There you
okay.
go.
So, so the changes were brought up at the annual meeting and then the board discussed it, because I was also looking at that Emerson Theological Institute, that the representative is nominated and there's no term limit on that. I would like to see a term limit on all the positions.
No, Emerson appoints their representative to the Anton board, and it's a permanent seat, different people, but a permanent seat.
It's a permanent seat, but different people take it depending on who Emerson recommends.
Correct.
Thank you.
Certainly. Mary Beth?
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, the text just went away. I guess the only thing my concern is there's a difference between studies and applied studies. And one of the things I know from having done a lot of classes and taught a lot of classes, and I know we all have, it's about the application. And so I'm not sure, you know, and it's the application that really hones the ability to apply the new thought principles. So that's, you know, I just in terms of it, it sounds kind of informal, and I hear both sides of the story, and I too, I mean, I really know that it's going to be vetted, and there, you know, the nominating committee is going to do their thing. It's just a matter of being clear. And like I said, I know there's a very big difference between studying spiritual material and being guided in the application of it. So I'm not sure that that's implied in this verbiage. Just putting it out there.
And thank you for that. We have a structured policy and a structured application in place that the nominating committee will be sending out to people who are interested, or that the nominating committee is interested in, and that goes into much more detail related to, you know, your life and your studies and your application of the teachings and so forth. So we're definitely getting more information than is here, but again, that's, as Robert mentioned, that's an effect of the policies and procedures, not the bylaws.
Got it.
Celeste.
Yes, I would like to submit for consideration the following adjectives maybe to be applied to this: is accredited New Thought Spiritual Studies or credentialed New Thought Spiritual Studies. That way, if there's an organization that's going to credential the studies, like Emerson or some other organization in other New Thought religions, then it's just because myself, having had a lot of independent study in New Thought over the years, and having all of my teachers have passed on to the next experience, thank goodness I have my certificates to get me up the ladder.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Other questions, comments, observations?
I'm going to make an observation. If
Betty has a hand up too.
yeah, I had my hand up right before Betty did,
Oh, yeah.
but we'll get to you, Betty. Continue reading in section 4 there. Who's an active voting contributing member of Anton for 2 years or more can be nominated. nominees must have a demonstrated commitment to the organization by offering their support, financial and otherwise, as well as attending at least one annual conference or retreat or participating in other ANTN events. These will all be people who we know and we know
Yeah.
well for 2 years by the time the nomination comes along. And as Jerry mentioned, when somebody came along and they were in a branch of spiritual endeavor that was not New Thought, they didn't even make membership because they weren't in alignment with the organization. So I'm very encouraged by how protective all y'all are about Anton and making sure that we don't get hijacked by somebody else. And I think that's kind of baked in to what it is that we're doing. So I'll stop talking now.
Yep. Thank you, Bill. Betty?
You're muted.
I wanted to follow up with the statement about certified or certificated, because if I were going to apply, I would think you're misleading me when there isn't a specificity that says certified, because I can go back to the 1980s and for certificates or for just letters that I studied. Not New Thought, it wasn't called New Thought at the time. I'm giving my age. It wasn't called New Thought at the time, but it really was religious science and so forth. But in other words, when I look at an application for something, I expect at least everything to be there that's going to be considered. Otherwise, if you don't like me, because so the 2 years you just didn't like the things I said, I don't know what I would have to rely on. That's my way of reading this, particularly in section 4, and everything is or credential, or license, or licensed credential or ordained minister, or a lay leader who has completed at least 2 years in New Thought spiritual studies.
Can I speak to it just really quickly to what you're
Sure.
saying?
Yep.
Just this is not the application. These are the bylaws, and that gives us room to say what we want the application to look like, so when it goes out to an applicant, it's going to have the specifics that we're asking for the nominee. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Yeah. So this isn't the application. Yeah.
Right. So
Thank
the
you.
policies and procedures and all of that is adjustable by the board. Whereas the bylaws, as we talked about before, to change them, that must be voted on by the membership. Yeah. Other questions, other comments?
I would, Michelle, Betty, I'd just like to understand what you were saying, because I do like the idea. Celeste, you brought it up, and Betty, I'm thinking you were saying you agreed with this, but I want to make sure to throw in the word accredited or credentialed, who has completed at least 2 years of accredited or credentialed New Thought spiritual studies. Betty, were you saying you agree with that you think that is a good idea?
Yes.
Okay.
That's my point.
Got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead, John.
I was just going to share with you, I don't know that everyone has an understanding about accredited versus credentialed. And that's something we look at regularly at Emerson when we are looking through an applicant's transcripts. So it's just meaning academic versus credential. It's just meaning whether they were on a degree path versus whether they were on a spirituality path, like a practitioner or a minister. So that's something we look at frequently, and I think it's easily done, but I just wanted to share that just in case someone didn't completely understand the meaning.
Okay.
And
So actually, if you're looking at, say, someone from Emerson and they've got both, you'll be like, this is study, regardless if it was a master's towards consciousness versus a ministerial degree or
Yeah, and to me, mostly what we want to do with this change is to say there's going to be one position on the board that's open to a lay member. And they need to have been ANTN members for 2 years. And there's a little bit of detail about what is required for a lay member to participate. And to my way of thinking, the less we can be specific about what we're looking for, the more likely it is we're going to avoid ruling out somebody. So, for example, there's a discussion about which of the New Thought teachings are credentialed and which ones have accreditation and which ones don't have those. So, would we be ruling somebody out? And if there were somebody who had been studying with, for example, Reverend Deb for a while, and her teaching isn't credentialed or accredited, but they're very high consciousness. They've been doing it for a while. They've got that going on. They've been participating at ANTN. They're beloved. They raise their hand and say, I'd like to be on the board. I wouldn't want to have the bylaws get in the way of us saying, yes, please come help.
Mhm.
Robert?
I think putting this in the bylaws also really does restrict us, or putting accredited or certificated in the bylaws limits us, because now we're gonna have to go back and define, well, whose accreditation and whose certificate counts. Does just pulling some names out of the hat, but does Agape certification count? Does James Mellon's certification count? Does a CSL or a Unity? My understanding is the Unity Ministry School is not accredited by anyone at this point. The Urban School is accredited, but the Unity School is not accredited in any way. I'm just wondering how much we can move into I think there's great ideas. How much of that can be moved into the policies and procedures and tasked with having that available within the policies and procedures so that we can pass this version today or this week in order to shape the elections that come in October. We will, if we do not procedurally through our governance model, we won't have another chance to make any of these changes before the next election at Unity Village in October. And I see this as the board doing a great job to bring forward changes that were proposed at the last meeting and move us in the right direction. I'd like to keep us moving in the right direction by approving these changes at this time, knowing that we can, and the board, you've got your whole board here listening, that we will take this into our work groups from now till October to determine what the exact changes to the policies would be and present those back at that time, but still have something in place that says we can elect a lay member and that we have a minimum of 2 years commitment to ANTN prior to being eligible for the board,
Right.
which I think was the main concern last year.
Right. Okay. Robert, thank you. Joy, you had a question or a comment?
Thank you. I was ordained and went through school at Brooks Divinity School way back when, and I know they're not credentialed and Unity isn't credentialed. So I just want to say that. It's just the verbiage.
Right.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Cynthia.
I just wanted to throw out the thought about the term lay member, and I've served on other boards in different organizations, and I think I would be sort of against adding that word accredited or credentialed, because that's sort of the purpose of that position of a lay member, is that they don't have so much training behind them. It's kind of like wanting the seat filler from the church to be coming to the board and serving the church in that regard. So just another perspective of that specific term lay member, because all those things beforehand say licensed, credentialed, licensed, this is a different type person that we can call. But I also see everyone else's perspective. I just wanted to throw out that
Good distinction.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mary Beth?
Well, I feel, I guess the word might be comforted by the other qualifications that are required. That, in other words, the person we would be considering would have the consciousness of ANTN because they will have been with us for 2 years. You know, they will be contributing time, talent, and treasure. I would presume will be probably already have seen them work on committees or whatever. And clearly, if they're putting their own money up to get to conference or doing their time to get here, they're going to be interested parties, and it does take a lot to be on the board. And I know that's covered as a preparation for serving. So I'm comfortable with this bylaw change.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Janine?
Yes, people are using the word accredited. I'm not sure what they mean by that. Do they mean academically accredited? Anton is, Emerson's not academically accredited. Like someone said, Unity's not accredited. What does that mean? I'm confused what that meant.
And that's a good reason to not include that here.
Right,
Exactly.
right. Yeah. John?
I was just about to explain it, but I think Bill's point handles it.
Yeah, okay. Other final questions or comments? Okay, all members will receive an email. Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but all Anson members will receive an email with a link for you to vote yes or no on the changes to the bylaws. And we ask you to do that within 7 days.
Yeah, the voting will be open for 7 days. You don't have to wait until the 6.5 day to go ahead and do that. What will happen is when you get the email, you click on the link, you'll have to log into your membership account on the website, because that's how we're making sure this is just going to be members who are voting. You get a chance to vote once. It will capture your contact information when you vote, so it's not a completely secret ballot, and that's going to be explained in the email. And that's because organization memberships get 2 votes and individual memberships get 1 vote, and we need to be able to keep track of it that way. But rest assured, nobody's going to be going in and saying, which way did you vote? We're looking for a consensus of the organization. And that'll be online. That'll be going out sometime later today.
Great. All right. With that in mind, I will pray us out and then adjourn us. Thank you so much for spending the extra time with us, and join me in the light for just a moment. So, staying in this consciousness of oneness, we give great thanks for this amazing organization that we call ANTN, for this technology that we call Zoom, for the opportunity to be together about the business of this organization and moving us forward. We give thanks for the love, the passion, the dedication of our beloved members. We give thanks for the friends of Anton who ideally will become members at some point. We move forward, and as we choose to mark our ballots electronically, we do so in love, in wisdom, in understanding about what is next and what is best for the future of Anton. So I give thanks for all of you for our time together, and together we say, and so it is.
So it is.
So it is.
Thank you all so much.